still don't understand, Spock. Why is Tsai worried about Zachel's knowledge getting to the Romulans? Surely they have their own methods for mind control? Spock interrupted with an intensity she had never seen in him. The humans of today cannot conceive of the type of power wielded by the ancient High Masters. These were the most powerful of all magicians. It is recorded that Zachel killed his enemies simply by willing it. The methods he used were quite gruesome. When the Romulans separated from the Vulcans, none of the old High Masters went with them. Those on Vulcan chose to align themselves with Surak. The discipline underwent a radical change in philosophy. The path of Kolinar still harnesses great mental powers, but applies them inward, to the individual's mind and emotions, rather than using them to control others. For the Romulans to gain control of these powers, for any war-loving race to gain control of them... Spock broke off and shook his head. I can discuss this no more. Tsai is attempting to guard us from Zachel's telepathic powers. I can try to shield my own thoughts, but it increases our chances of being detected. Dwen turned away to stare blindly at the view screen. My God! With a thrill of fear, she recalled the card that touched death. The magician, ill-dignified. The ship was no longer moving. McCoy woke and pushed himself to a sitting position, then stood up and peered at the pilot's chair. It was empty. Sekar must have landed the scout on Arcturus. McCoy called out as he rose unsteadily to his feet. Sekar? Zachel? No reply. McCoy crowed with as much energy as he could muster. Hallelujah! I've been abandoned! He dashed to the front of the ship and settled into the pilot's chair. It took him a minute to find the subspace radio controls. This is a Class 1 distress call. A shrill burst of static made him grimace and cover his offended ears with his hands. McCoy tried again. This time the noise was even louder. Discouraged, he switched the radio off, then headed for the hatch. Eagerly, confidently, he strode face first into the hatch and landed sprawled on his backside, rubbing his nose. The Vulcan had locked him in the ship with no chance of escape. McCoy returned to the console and slumped in the pilot's chair. So this was what Dwen foresaw. McCoy, cut down in the prime of life by a crazed Vulcan. Spock would have deemed it poetic justice. McCoy leaned forward and rested his forehead against the console. A sound at the hatch distracted him from his misery. The doctor raised his head just as the hatch opened. He expected to see Zachel, and therefore saw nothing. Nothing, that is, until he adjusted his vision downward to where the stocky figure of the Tellarite stood. To McCoy's human eyes, the Tellarite's squat, hair-covered body and decidedly porcine features were repugnant, though its thick fur was a strikingly lovely shade of copper. The diminutive alien raised a phaser and growled at McCoy in a language that was definitely not standard. Under normal conditions, the doctor would have been terrified. Now, he grinned hugely at his attacker. You want to steal the scout, don't you? The Tellarite emitted a nasty snarl and gestured with the phaser. Cheerfully, McCoy raised his hands and retreated from the pilot's chair. You're more than welcome to it, friend. He took a step backwards toward the hatch as the thief crossed over to the controls. The hatch swooshed open behind the doctor, who was babbling with relief. Thank you, and bless you. He stepped outside and sank into damp, marshy ground as the hatch closed. He was free. Free and alone in the Arcturan night. McCoy turned and ran before his accidental benefactor could change his mind. It was night, and the ground was thick, ankle-deep mud that was littered with garbage. McCoy ran as fast as he could in the treacherous slime. In front of him shone the bright glow of a city. He'd find his way to a public comm station, flag down the nearest Federation vessel, and see Dwen and Spock again. As the time-worn saying goes, Arcturus is the place where everyone goes to make deals. Nestled in the center of a major pirate corridor, Arcturus has stubbornly resisted all overtures from the Romulans, the Klingons, and even the Federation. The planet is infamous, one of the few bona fide anarchies in the galaxy. There is no Arcturan government, therefore there is no bureaucracy, no red tape, and certainly no laws. If any part of the planet can be said to be ruled by anyone to any degree, it is related to who owns the deadliest weapon at any given moment. While Arcturus is the one place in the galaxy where Klingons, Romulans, and Terrans are free to enjoy the lucrative aspect of illegal trade between their empires, the reality is scarcely utopian. Swift and bloody fights are commonplace in the bars, and the natives are unprejudiced as to the outcome. They regard their Terran, Klingon, and Romulan visitors with equal contempt. It was into this unhealthy milieu that McCoy stumbled. Before him stood the city, a collection of sleek and shining edifices that contrasted shockingly with the squalor outside. Each building was veiled by its own force field. As McCoy neared, he saw that the nearest building was also guarded by two armed, surly Arcturans. The doctor approached them with an ingratiating smile.
"Excuse me, sirs, but my name is Dr. Leonard McCoy, and I need to get to a public comm. I was kidnapped, you see, and I..."
One guard curled his upper lip, revealing black, toothless gums, and snarled at McCoy with the conviction of a trained Doberman. The other raised his phaser and picked out a spot in the middle of McCoy's forehead. McCoy raised his hands and backed away. The guards cackled derisively as the doctor darted back into the dark street. Discouraged, McCoy was preparing to approach a different building when he heard the sound of feminine laughter behind him. He turned and saw a tall, shadowy figure. It stepped forward into the city's glow. Like all Arcturans, she was humanoid, and the ghostly pale skin of her forehead was creased with folds of excess skin, reminding McCoy of a certain Asian breed of dog. Her earlobes were pendulous and crusted with dozens of sparkling earrings, and she was quite bald, save for an ornament of exotic feathers on the crown of her head. At the sight of McCoy, her thick lips stretched into a smile. "You here are new," McCoy answered eagerly.
Yes. Is this Arcturus?"
She nodded.
"I need very badly to get to a public comm station. I need to get in touch with Federation authorities."
The Arcturan threw back her head and laughed. Her feather spray fluttered in the humid breeze. "On Arcturus you will find public comms not. Private comms, yes. Money. Much more."
"Well, the money doesn't matter. If you can just get me to a comm, I'll pay you. Name your price."
She lowered her eyelids and studied him warily. "Money you have now?" McCoy was disheartened by the memory that his ID was baking inside an empty cell in the Vulcan desert.
No, but if I can just get to a comm, I could call my bank. They could verify my retinal scan, and I could get money, 100 credits if you want."
She sniffed and began to walk away.
"All right, 200.
The Arcturan stopped with her back to him. 350. Desperate, McCoy agreed.
"All right, 350.
She turned and twined her thick arm around his, then gestured skyward with her white chin, at the moons racing through the mist. Night of 3 full moons. Only once every 6 years. 3 full mean. Very strange. Very wonderful things tonight.
McCoy sighed. I can hardly wait.
She led him back to the first building. Both guards smiled. One winked familiarly at her as he stepped aside to permit them passage.
Picked up another stray, Ziza? That one's too small. I'd throw him back if I were you.
Ziza swept past them with dignity. Well, he's rich enough. The green force field in front of them dissolved. The two stepped inside. McCoy caught his breath, stunned by the sights, the smells, the sounds. The air was thick with smoke that stung his eyes. Ziza pointed with a long silver nail. There, at the bar. Ask the bartender. McCoy squinted through the dim haze. The room was crowded with humans, Tellarites, Signusians, a Klingon, and a Horta getting chummy with a group of Andorians, even a stray pair of Romulans. It was a veritable Tower of Babel, through which was pumped slick, sanitized music, slightly too loud, so that everyone shouted to be heard. Behind a long, old-fashioned bar, pouring from an unlabeled bottle gripped in his clawed hand, stood a 7-foot corn. His bright green scales flashing iridescent mauve every time he moved. McCoy stared for a moment at the huge reptile's sharp claws and teeth, and meditated on the fact that he was not yet free from the shadow of Caradwen's prediction. The doctor took a step forward into the crowd. It took some time before he saw light and finally leaned against the wood bar. The bartender was holding out his claw for payment from an unseen patron at the far end of the bar. McCoy raised an arm.
Excuse me, bartender?
After collecting the bill, the Gorn plodded over to McCoy, put his gigantic claws on the bar's filthy surface, and leaned forward. McCoy could feel and hear the reptile's hot, rattling breath as the bartender stared expectantly at him. McCoy shouted over the din.
I don't want a drink. I'm looking for a comm station. I understand you know where one is.
The Gorn drew back his head and hissed. McCoy forced himself not to react.
I'll pay you well.
The bartender held out his claw to reveal a thickly padded, soft white palm. McCoy felt a twinge of digestive discomfort.
I don't actually have the money on me. I need to access my bank account from the cop.
The Gorn roared. McCoy turned, seriously contemplating flight, but something pale and soft barred his way. Ziza smiled and fluttered her white lashes at the bartender. It's okay, Urk. This one is with I. He not pay, then I pay. Urk growled softly but squeezed his bulk through an opening in the bar and motioned for McCoy and Ziza to follow. He led them to a deserted alcove where a comm station sat, protected by its own mini force field. Urk produced a small black device and aimed it at the comm. The shield dissolved with a high-pitched pop. Turning to Ziza, the Gorn said,
Fail to pay me, and I'll take it out of both your hides.
Ziza nodded gravely. Understood, Urk. The Gorn grunted and lumbered off. McCoy leaned over the comm's retinal scanner, which drew a white beam of light over the doctor's right eye. After several seconds, the terminal screen lit up with the words, McCoy, Leonard H., MD, identity verified, credit access available. Please enter your secret code. McCoy punched in his personal code. It took a minute of waiting to get the interstellar operator, who seemed to find it hysterically funny that someone on Arcturus would want to flag down a Federation vessel.
Contact with Federation vessel impossible. You here are you, yes?
McCoy's temper snapped.
I here am you. And I've just about had it with your barbaric backwater inefficiency. Get me Earth. Get me Starfleet headquarters in San Francisco. Admiral James T. Kirk.
After the laughter stopped, the operator asked slyly,
Earth very far. How much? What do you mean, how much? This is a comm station. You're an operator. This is being billed to my personal account.
The channel crackled and seemed on the verge of closing.
Wait a minute. All right, how much do you want? How much? 200 credits. All right, damn you. 200 credits. You've got my account number.
Suddenly, there was nothing but static on the screen. McCoy held his breath and waited. At last, a blurred, choppy image coalesced on the screen. Tears of relief formed in McCoy's eyes, but the image was not of Jim Kirk, but of a much younger man.
Admiral Kirk's office. Commander Kevin Riley here.
McCoy smiled in recognition.
Riley, this is Dr. Leonard McCoy. Hey, I'm in serious trouble, and I desperately need to talk to Jim.
Dr. McCoy, it's been a long time. How are you?
There's no time for that, Riley. Listen, I need to talk to Jim now.
Riley shook his head.
Well, sorry, Doctor, he's not here. He's still in Vulcan. Is there anything I can help you with?
McCoy's throat constricted, but he calmed himself and said,
Yes, this is going to sound crazy, but I've been kidnapped by an insane Vulcan. I think he's trying to smuggle the Romulans some sort of secret weapon. I just escaped, and I'm calling from Arcturus.
Riley gaped at him in utter disbelief.
A Vulcan? Doctor, are you serious?
You heard me, Riley. A Vulcan. But he's space happy. Look, now, I'm not drunk, and I'm not having a psychotic interlude. I need your help before this Vulcan finds me. Could you route a ship this way?
Riley narrowed his eyes and pondered this. McCoy felt a surge of panic. Desperately, he leaned closer to the comm screen.
Riley, I'm not kidding. This is not a practical joke. This Vulcan is dangerous. I honestly think he's capable of hurting some.
The doctor broke off as Ziza grabbed his wrist painfully hard. Furious, he turned to her.
Damn it, can't you see I'm...
But the words to complete his thought flew from his head forever. For it was not Ziza who gripped his arm. McCoy turned and found himself staring into the dark, slightly insane eyes of the grinning Vulcan Zackle. McCoy yelped as Zackle pulled him away from the comm.
Riley, help!
Ziza tried to block Zackle with thick, pale arms. The Vulcan regarded her with mild irritation, a look, nothing more. Ziza fell to her knees and screamed in pain. Behind them, on the comm screen, Riley called out,
Dr. McCoy, are you all right?
A thunderous roar reverberated at the alcove's entrance. McCoy looked over Zackle's shoulder and saw the Gorn. Burke's round, amber eyes caught the dim light and glowed with fury. He emitted a dangerous rumble and headed with frightening speed directly toward Zackle and McCoy. The doctor raised his hands in a gesture of innocence.
I didn't hurt her. He did it.
Ziza still writhed, moaning on the floor. The Gorn was clearly uninterested in assignation of blame. McCoy cringed as Urk wielded his long, deadly claws and leapt at the human and the Vulcan. Fearlessly, Zackle fixed his gaze on Urk and stepped toward him. An impossible thing happened as Urk and the Vulcan stared transfixed at each other. The Gorn began to melt. His skin sloughed off in waves. leaving behind red, brown muscle and bone, and collected around his feet in brilliant green puddles. The glistening organs in his abdominal cavity were exposed. Some still pulsed and quivered. Burke emitted a horrified wail and sagged into a great heap. McCoy was too stunned and sickened to think, to move, almost even to breathe. He looked away from the poor Gorn and stared at the Vulcan. Zackle was smiling with childlike enjoyment. Nearby, Ziza seemed to recover and began to weep softly. There were only two possible explanations, McCoy told himself, as Zackle led him through the hushed bar. The first was that he, McCoy, had gone certifiably insane. But the second, that he had not. And that all this was really happening was far too horrible to contemplate. In his guest quarters on the planet Jana, not far from the Romulan neutral zone, James Kirk had just finished a diplomatic mission and was preparing to return to Earth when he received an urgent call from his aide, Commander Kevin Riley. Kirk leaned over the communications terminal as Riley's anxious face peered out from the screen.
"What is it, Riley? Crisis at the office?"
He said it half-jokingly, but Riley did not smile.
Not exactly, sir. I have some upsetting news about Dr. McCoy.
Kirk sat heavily.
"What's happened? Is he all right?"
He's been kidnapped, Admiral. He's escaped for a little while on Arcturus.
Arcturus?
Riley, if this is your idea of a bad joke...
The younger man took a deep breath.
I'm sorry, Admiral, but I'm afraid that no matter how many times I repeat, it still won't make sense. This morning, Dr. McCoy called. The headquarters operator confirmed the signal came from Arcturus. McCoy seemed very upset. He said he'd been kidnapped by an insane Vulcan. As he was asking for help, the Vulcan came. Sir, I'm not sure how to explain, but the Vulcan really did look berserk. Dangerous. And he was violent. Dr. McCoy was with a woman, and the Vulcan started hurting her, though I couldn't see how. Well, she fell down and started screaming, and Dr. McCoy yelled at the Vulcan to stop, that he would go with him. Just leave the woman alone. And then the channel was closed.
Kirk stared for a moment at Riley, studying the young commander's expression. Riley clearly was in dead earnest. Yet it was almost too absurd for Kirk's mind to accept the idea. After a time, the Admiral said,
"So, what happened to McCoy?"
I don't know, sir, but I contacted the Vulcans. They verified the doctor's story, but said that they would take care of it. They have a rescue mission underway, led by Mr. Spock.
Spock? Leading a rescue mission? But he's a civilian now.
I know, sir. But judging from the Vulcans' reaction, they didn't want Starfleet involved.
Kirk considered this for a moment, then made his decision. Whether the Vulcans wanted him or not, he would find Spock and offer his help. All he needed now was approval from Fleet Admiral Nagura and a ship. And he was determined to get both.
Riley, transfer me to Admiral Nagura right away.
With Fleet Admiral Nagura's permission, Kirk obtained a small, fast fighter vessel and warped full speed toward the neutral zone. Since McCoy had called from Arcturus to say he was headed for Romulan space, Kirk projected the most direct course between Arcturus and the neutral zone and headed there. His logic paid off. Not far outside the Arcturan solar system, the ship's sensors detected a research vessel, Vulcan Registry. Pulse quickening, Kirk leaned over the subspace transmitter.
Admiral James T. Kirk to Vulcan vessel. Please identify yourselves.
The reply was terse, cool, without a hint of recognition.
This is Spock.
Spock, listen, I know about McCoy. He tried to contact me at Starfleet headquarters, and I want to help.
I see you have inferred our situation, Admiral. However, we are in no need of assistance.
Kirk stiffened. He would have felt no differently had Spock slapped him in the face. But the situation was too critical to waste time worrying about hurt feelings. Spock, whatever kind of weapon that Vulcan's got, the Romulans have gone to an awful lot of trouble to get it. I'm coming along. Spock's voice was suddenly surprisingly full of passion.
I emphatically request that you do not, Admiral. The mission contains dangers you cannot fathom.
I've dealt with the Romulans on their own turf before. And if it's that dangerous, then how can I let you go without my help?
I have special assistance, the nature of which I am not at liberty to discuss. Admiral, if you insist on following, there is nothing we can do to protect you. I can only warn you that the danger is great.
Kirk no longer hid his anger and frustration. I'm not asking for your protection. Damn it, Spock, I'm asking to help. Spock interrupted.
Forgive me. Admiral, I can no longer continue this conversation.
But Spock... The Vulcan closed the channel. Disbelieving, Kirk stared at the transmitter. He raised a fist, intending to slam it down on the console, and let it drop limply against the toggle that cut off transmission. What could possibly account for Spock's distant attitude? Kirk turned from the console. Whatever the cause, it didn't matter. He was following the Vulcan ship anyway. McCoy woke to the shrill signal of a subspace radio, followed by the sound of Sekar, chattering excitedly into the transmitter, in a language not quite Vulcan. Romulan, of course. A Romulan vessel must have finally responded to Sekar's signal. McCoy sat forward, suddenly alert. Sekar engaged the autopilot, rose, and headed back toward McCoy. Dr. McCoy, would you mind stepping onto the transporter platform with me? McCoy rose and stepped with the Vulcan onto the platform. As the gentle nausea of dematerialization swept over him, the doctor closed his eyes. When he dared open them again, he saw that he was in the transporter room of a Romulan bird of prey. 4 Romulan Centurions approached. Sekar, or Zackle, stepped forward and uttered a greeting. The Centurions responded politely, 2 of them escorting Sekar like an honored guest, while the other 2 drew phasers and motioned at McCoy in a manner that made clear that he was now their prisoner. McCoy expected to be led to the brig, and was. The Centurions erected a force field at the door of his cell, making escape impossible. But then, surprisingly, the Centurions paused at an adjacent cell and motioned with their phasers at Sekar. Clearly, they had played a trick on the unsuspecting Vulcan. As Sekar stood at the entrance to the holding cell, his expression became one of pure fury as he relinquished control to Zackle. Zackle turned to the nearest guard, who dropped his phaser and put his hands to his head. The Romulan screamed and reared back in agony, palms pressed against his temple, then collapsed on the floor. Blood trickled from his ears and nose. The other Centurion stared, sickened and disbelieving, at Zackle. Zackle smiled at them and spread his hands in a gesture of invitation.
Please, use your weapons.
Their hands trembled so that they could not take aim. One of them dropped his phaser. Zackle laughed as he willed the guards dead. Then he went to find the bridge. Commander Alray swiveled in her command chair to frown at her communications officer. What did you say, Ree? Commander, the transporter room verifies the prisoners are on board, but I have lost contact with their escort. Alray leapt to her feet, She was one of the youngest commanders in the Romulan fleet and one of the most ambitious. Here was an unasked-for gift to launch her to even greater heights. 2 Federation prisoners. She would not let them go so easily. Notify the crew. First-degree alert. Inform them of the escaped prisoners. Send available Centurions to the transporter room and the brig. Science Officer Trell, adjust our scanners for a human... She broke off as the bridge doors opened and wheeled around to regard the intruder. It was the Vulcan. Alray drew her phaser. He spoke, undaunted by the weapon leveled at his chest.
Greetings. You are the commander. I spoke with you earlier on the Scout.
Alray studied him suspiciously. I remember. You say you work for our Empire and that you have brought us a prize. But I know nothing of your mission. Therefore, I am obligated to treat you as an agent of the Federation until I receive verification of your story from my superiors. His face twisted angrily as he thundered.
Commander Alray, I have waited 15,000 seasons to offer my help to your race.
Help? What sort of help?
The power to reclaim your birthright, the planet Vulcan. I am Zakel, High Master of the Kolinaru. I have come to bring the lost knowledge of the mind rules to you.
I see. Alray came close to saying dryly, and I am president of the Federation Council. But instinct held her back. Suppose that the Vulcan were telling the truth. As a child, she had heard whispered stories of the Mind Lord's powers, of their undying souls hidden in secret caverns deep beneath Vulcan's surface, and she had half believed. If you are who you claim, then give us proof. And if you are who you say, I shall welcome you gladly. The Vulcan's lips twisted bitterly.
Very well. Proof you shall have.
He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again. The helmsman looked up from his console in panic. Commander, the ship's self-destruct sequence has been initiated. I am trying to abort it, but controls do not respond. So, the legends were true, and the elements had seen fit to grace her with a visit from a Vulcan Mind Lord. Alray spoke softly, never moving her gaze from the Vulcan's face. Very good, Lord Zakel. Would you please... Zakel interrupted.
Control is returned.
And he smiled. But the expression made Alray's blood run cold. Yet if she could recruit him to her cause, if she could convince him to teach her his mental wizardry first, and no one else... Zakel laughed.
Then you would kill me, Commander, and use your new powers to gain control of the Empire. I'm afraid I can't permit that. You are a dangerous woman, and I need an example for the others.
In one horrifying flash, he forced her to see her own death approach. She faced it bravely, as a Romulan ought, and did not scream. Before the blood vessels in her eyes burst, the last thing she saw was the Vulcan, smiling. Elements, take you, old man. Zakel stepped forward and stood cheerfully over Alray's blood-mottled corpse as he addressed her crew.
And now, I wish to be taken to your Presidium, please.
For a moment, none of the stricken crew stirred. Zakel smiled at them.
Then I presume that you all wish to die bravely, as your commander did, of massive internal hemorrhage.
Another pause, and then, very slowly, the helmsman began to lay in a course.
Sai spoke. "It is time." Spock and Caradwen swiveled in their chairs to see the High Master with their eyes open, regarding them serenely. The Vulcan ship had passed into the neutral zone some time ago, and now, cloaked and shielded, they had located Zakel and the ship aboard which Leonard McCoy was a prisoner. Caradwen rose and followed Sai to the transporter. Even though Dr. Llewellyn was human, her Esper blindness made her the safer choice as transporter operator. Zakel would be less likely to sense Sai's impending arrival. Spock busied himself with scanning the Romulan vessel. 5 life forms were aboard. 1 Vulcan, 3 Romulans, and 1 human, Leonard McCoy. Spock was peripherally aware that Sai had stepped onto the transporter pad and was giving the amazed Dr. Llewellyn the proper coordinates. Spock tried to ignore this as best he could to prevent Zakel from anticipating Sai's arrival. He focused his attention on the scanner readout. It showed a tiny, distorted area of space close to the Vulcan research vessel. Kirk! Spock felt an honest surge of anger toward his former captain. Kirk had ignored Spock's warning and followed regardless, assuming that no matter what the danger, he, Kirk, was more than a match for it. His appearance now would only serve to jeopardize the mission. There was a sudden loud crackling sound behind Spock. The ship began to vibrate as if the outer hull were being shaken by a giant, invisible hand. Spock turned in time to see Sai collapse on the platform. The transporter rained red-orange sparks. There was the acrid smell of smoke. Caradwen called to Spock as she led the injured High Master toward a nearby bunk.
Spock, I don't understand. The transporter seemed to be working perfectly.
But Spock understood all too well. He strode to the bunk where Sai lay. She was semi-conscious, not fatally wounded, but there were dark, ugly burns on her face and neck. The whole ship was vibrating now, trying to shake itself apart. Spock half-shouted, loudly enough to be heard over the ship's groaning.
Sai, I will go.
Sai's eyelids fluttered, then opened. The vibrations eased.
No, Spock. You have neither the power nor the training.
She looked up at Dr. Llewellyn. Caradwen's eyes filled with a curious brightness.
Of course. I'll go. It only makes sense.
Sai reached out and pressed warm, unsteady fingers against Caradwen's forehead. The High Master reached deep and touched the inner core of Dwen's mind. The effect on Dwen was one of euphoria and astonishment at the revelation that she and Sai were not alone. The spirit of Sotek, Zakel's former student and greatest enemy, was with them. His great ancient mind spoke to her without words. We offer you the gift of magic, Dr. Llewellyn. And yet, the magic you offer us is far greater than our own. The silent voice changed and became Sai's.
Be aware, Dr. Llewellyn, that what we offer is fraught with danger. Once your mind is joined to Sotek's, your minds will be locked together so long as your body lives.
Dwen smiled and said aloud, I'm willing to risk it if Sotek is too. Sai's eyes closed.
He is willing to risk all, including the second death. Are you?
A sword-sharp image flashed in Caradwen's mind. Death again. This time, It was not the gray heaviness she had seen hovering over Spock and McCoy. This time, she saw it clearly, and she was not afraid. The tarot reading would be fulfilled, but Spock and Leonard McCoy did not have to die. It was Caradwen's destiny, if she had the courage to take their place. Sotek saw the image too and did not shrink from it. It was a choice between life and death. He and Caradwen could choose to remain on the ship and be safe, and Spock and McCoy would die, and the evil would live. Or there was another path. Dwen and Sotek made their decision. Yes, Sai, I will go. After the meld was complete, Spock lowered the shields to beam Dwen over to the Romulan vessel. For Dwen, the union with Sotek's mind was sheer bliss. All the knowledge, all the experience of a lifespan twice that of a human's was available to her. Each gained and lost something in the exchange. Sotek lost the ability to sense Zakel's thoughts, but gained the freedom to move about without Zakel's detection. Dwen gained Sotek's wisdom and power, and the loss would be her own life. She materialized on the engineering deck of the Romulan ship. At its far end, a Romulan engineer sat with his back to her. He sat half-slumped at his station, as if he were drugged. Dwen approached silently and laid a hand against the Romulan's left temple. With her right hand, she found the spot on the engineer's right shoulder and pressed. The Romulan slumped forward, unconscious, and in the millisecond between the time Dwen's left and right hands touched him, Sotek gathered the necessary knowledge. If Zakel sensed anything, he might think his prisoner had gone to sleep. Dwen put the engineer's knowledge to good use. She leaned over to reach the console. The ship's computer responded to her touch. She programmed the computer to send out a distress signal. It warned of the ship's imminent destruction and instructed all vessels to stay clear. The effects of the explosion would be felt over an area of roughly 1 square parsec. It was odd to hear and see the Romulan language and understand it. It was odder still to program in what she knew would be the manner of her own death. Quickly, she initiated the Bird of Prey's auto-destruct sequence. When Dwen and Sotek finished their work, she straightened and headed for the lift, up to the first level, then made her way down the corridor to the bridge. The doors closed behind her as she stepped onto the bridge, her gaze fixed on the back of the dead commander's chair. At the sound of the doors snapping shut, Zakel whirled the chair around and gaped at her, his expression one of utter astonishment. Dwen's lips moved, but it was Sotek who spoke.
Master, I have come.
After the passage of 2,000 years, the two powerful enemies faced each other again, this time for the final battle. Once in the neutral zone, Spock's research vessel engaged its cloaking device, and Kirk found it a challenge to follow. Kirk adjusted the sensors on his two-person vessel to cover a broader range, then projected the research ship's current course. Less than a parsec distant sailed a lone bird of prey, which just happened to hold a small Federation scout in its tractor beam. This was no doubt the vessel Spock pursued. When at last he was within transporter range of the vessel, Kirk checked his scanners. The bird of prey was uncloaked, unshielded, apparently unaware or unafraid of its pursuers. Curiously, The life form readings indicated only 3 Romulans aboard. Either the rest of the crew had deserted ship or been killed. There were 2 humans aboard, one on the lowest level of the ship, probably the brig, and one on the bridge. Instinct told Kirk that McCoy was a prisoner in the brig, which meant he was shielded from transporter beams to prevent escape. Kirk would have to beam over to release him, then transport the 2 of them back. There was also 1 Vulcan aboard, most likely McCoy's mysterious kidnapper. Kirk set the ship on autopilot, then went over to the small transporter and locked in the coordinates for the Bird of Prey's brig. Zacho's face contorted with rage as he recognized his foe. He leapt to his feet, addressing his former student by his chosen name.
Soltek, so you are trying to stop me again.
But the circumstances were far different from those of 2,000 years before. For now, Sotek's mind was closed, impenetrable. Impossibly, this human woman had brought Sotek onto the ship without Zacho's knowledge. The realization made Zacho afraid. The woman's form began to glow a soft blue tinged with gold. She took a step forward and spoke aloud in a voice Zacho recognized as Sotek's own.
And now, Master, your time has come again.
McCoy lay on the cold, hard floor of the brig,